You were recognised for building the company from Forbes 30 under 30. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience. Like, is there like an application, or did they just get in touch? Or
So I didn't actually apply for it. I think there is an application that you can do.
People recommend you or something?
Yeah, so I think me and my co-founder got nominated by a few people, and they just reached out to us saying, hey, you've been nominated for this. Can you just can you just confirm this factual information?
Sure.
Agreed. And then you don't actually find out until the morning it's released.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you don't actually...
So you wake up and there's a picture of you
exactly.
on Forbes.
So they ask you to submit a photo and factually, check all of this, but at that point they don't confirm if you made it or not.
Cool.
And yeah, that was an exciting moment, but I think... for like, I guess my family and stuff. My mum and dad, unfortunately, unfortunately they don't spend or hear much time for me, but for them that's like a proud, a proud moment for them to look back at. And similarly, I guess for me and Matthias, I think one thing that we've done bad, and I think, I'm trying to change, is actually celebrate small successes along the way. Yeah. And I think that was quite nice for a lot of people and friends and family who didn't really know what I was doing to reach out to me like, oh, this is really cool.
Everyone's heard of Forbes.
Yeah, but so that it was quite a nice checkpoint for me and Matthias to reflect and look back on, I guess.
Yeah. What about younger people that, I'm not saying that people should aspire to have a goal of being on that list. The goal should be to build something cool, and then you get recognised as a result of that. But for people that want to build something cool and then get that recognition, we talked earlier in the episode about tips for entrepreneurs, but I guess more specifically for, I suppose, people, women in tech or, BAME individuals, what would you say for that group of people?
I'd say just back yourself and do it. I think that's one thing that I've managed to take and grow is in confidence. I think if I look at myself 5 years ago, the confidence levels I had then compared to now, and when I meet founders of, especially female founders, they're just, from my perspective, I think, I'm maybe biased, but I think they're smarter and I think they're great. And, but I think the world is used to hearing this, like, I'm going to go and build $1 billion company. And, especially me, I was a bit like, we will get there, but first we have to do this. And I was like, I should have just probably gone and said, we're going to build $1 billion company. But I've not changed, actually. I've, stayed true, and I've just attracted investors who see that. And I think it's just about being confident, back yourself. And I also think the other thing is, which I think, we need to be better at in general as a society, is accepting failure. I think I take a lot of inspiration. I speak to a lot of founders in San Francisco and etc. And they're so open to failing, and it's not seen bad. I think here, especially where I feel like I come from, there's failure seen as a bad thing, and that stops a lot of people taking risks. For me, when I started Hive, I knew, a strong possibility, because if you look at how many startups actually become successful, a strong possibility is failure. But I accepted that, and I was going to be happy with that. But you learn so much along the journey, and by failing, it's really not a bad thing. If you'd learn so much along the way. So I think just normalizing failure to allowing people to take more risk would be a great thing.
In the Bay Area, it's like a badge of honour to have failed.
Yeah, 100%.
No investor, certainly that I know of, would look down upon an entrepreneur trying to raise a new round or something because their previous companies didn't work. They'd just look down upon somebody that never gave it a go in the first place.
Yep.
In the UK, I think we have a different approach. We see failure as, oh, this person's got a bad track record, let's skip this person. Yeah, does that make sense?
Definitely. And I think that's what when I speak to young founders and people who want to start companies, first I always tell them actually how hard it is, because I think, like we spoke about at the start, there's a lot of glamorization in building your own company. It's like, do you really know what you're going to get yourself into? Because if someone told me really, what I was getting myself into at the start, I still would have done it. And then secondly is just don't be afraid to fail. Like, don't be afraid. You learn the most when you fail. And that's super important to know and accept. And you probably will fail at some point of the journey. We've done Hive for a few years. Of course, we've made mistakes along the way, but when we make mistakes, that's the biggest learning curves is what we make then. So I think those two things is just, know what you're getting yourself into, and then just being okay with failing and taking risks.
And most people aren't, because when you fail, you basically have two choices. You can go, that didn't work, I'm going to give up, which is like what 90% plus of people do. The ones that end up being, successful in the eyes of society are the ones that go, okay, that didn't work, here's a reason why, let's go again, let's change, let's pivot, let's adapt. Why do you think it's only a small percentage of people that think that way? Are entrepreneurs born? Are they made? Is that something that you've ever thought about?
I don't know. I think it's really funny because I've always had the spark of entrepreneurship from as long as I can remember. From early memories, I always remembered being inspired. I mean, growing up in the UK, I watched The Apprentice at like 7, 8 years old, right? Just that was the stuff that excited me. That was the stuff that excited me the most. And I grew up with a family of businesses around me. My dad had a small business, my uncles had a business, and not startups or anything, but dinner table discussions for me revolved around that. So for me, that I knew gave me more excitement than doing an essay or things like that. Helping strategize with my dad about, we should do this, dad, or with my uncles and stuff like that. So I felt like I was born, but also nurtured around me. Right? It help with that. Had I been in a different family environment where all my family were in traditional jobs, maybe that'd be slightly different. And then look at my co-founder Matthias. He comes from a family business background. His mum started a family business. So maybe it's a combination of two, is how you're brought up with that around you. And when it's a family business, you're involved a lot more because that is your livelihood. So I think there's a combination of you're born with it, but environment and what you expose yourself to as well growing up. And just I think as you get older, and I graduated from university and got a job offer at a consulting firm, and my dad was a bit annoyed at me when I declined it, but I was like, no, I want to start my own company. And I still had that risk-taking within me, even though my dad was like, even though he had his own business, he was like, no, don't do it.
Probably not annoyed anymore, I mean.
But in that period he was, I look back and I'm like, why was you started your own business, but
I did 5 years with a big corporate beforehand though. So, and I think one thing for me was I didn't perhaps have those dinner table conversations growing up. And a lot of people don't have, they have to create the entrepreneurial circle around them, right? And even if your family weren't creating startups and raising cash, completely different to a small family business, right? What would you say to people that they don't have anyone around them that wants to learn about business? For me, I read a shit ton of books, and I started a podcast 3 years ago whilst I was an employee to start meeting great people to inspire me, because you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time
100%.
with, right? So what would you say about network and
I think it's super important. Right? Business and startups are completely different. And the dynamics of a startup are completely different to a business. And I only actually learned that dynamic when I was around 20 years old, when I took a trip to San Francisco, and I was like, whoa, okay, all these big tech companies, this is what it means to get product market fit, grows quickly. I just been exposed to that. So I went through my own learning curve of like the startup side of the world. And for me, it was just, we're living in a time where there's so much content out there. Luckily, Europe is getting a bit more mature now in the startup ecosystem as well. I mean, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, it's very mature, but here now it's getting better. People are talking about it. People are seeing people. So I think reading books. There are so many books out there, and I still read constantly because depending on what stage of my journey I'm at, I'll reread the same books. It's I read that 2 years ago, but now it's more important for me. Reading books, listening to podcasts, and also surrounding yourself with those people that you want to be surrounded by. I've got a lot of friends who are founders, who are investors, and that's really helpful and inspiring for me as well.
So you mentioned there around learning from books, from people, from podcasts. Are there any particular books, podcast recommendations that you'd give, I guess, specifically to entrepreneurs, startup founders, and that sort of thing?
The first book to read everything is great, especially when you're in that scrappy stage, and it's probably very cliche to say this, but 0 to 1. That's an absolutely incrable book at the start.
And a small book as well.
Tiny.
I've read it 10 times because you can read it in one sitting.
But the other books, I think The Hard Things, about the hard things, Good to Great.
Horowitz,
Good to Great is a fantastic book.
Collins,
Grit also is a great book. Those type of books.
We share a library.
I've got a whole stack of it. But then, so that's on that side, and then the podcast side. I mean, there's so much out there. It's also, you've got to be careful about what you consume at what time, because you can listen to the wrong content as well, where you see a founder who's like exited and you're like, that's so far away from my journey. And as aspiring as they are, and I definitely listen to loads of them, Harry Stebbins podcast, Diary of a CEO, typical.
Harry Stebbins been on mine.
So all those are like amazing when you listen to founders. But then I also try to surround myself with founders who maybe are like a year or two away from me.
Sure.
Because if I'm listening, to the Airbnb story, who's like, IPO'd, I'm like, yeah, it's so far away and not really relatable to me. But then if I speak to a founder who's, you know, a head office team of like 150, scaling really rapidly, and I'm like, that is very relatable to me.
More valuable, because if they're 1 or 2 steps ahead, they can show you how to get to where they are, right? But listening to someone like Brian with Airbnb, these are billion-dollar unicorns.
But it's important to have them listen to all.
Absolutely. But
because the Brian,
don't just listen to that.
The Brians, and you know, that gives you like the vision of like, yes, we can also build a billion-dollar company. They did it, we can do it, and that's really important to always keep that vision and you know that big vision. But then also, you know, just you know, combining with a lot of relatable stuff around as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one thing that I think you might correct me if you feel differently, but where you seem to get your drive from is the whole sports athletic side when you were growing up, right? So you were captain of Manchester City's under-17s.
So from like 11 to
so you were in leadership from a very young age, right? What was that like, kind of having to train, to motivate, to inspire, you know, as a teenager, as a kid, really? And what lessons did you learn from the world of sports that you can apply to business?
Yeah, I think sport and business has a really good correlation. I actually have a coach who is ex-director of medical sciences at Everton Football Club.
Okay.
And so I think there's a lot of correlation to it, and he's really good at, because I've been a sports athlete before getting into my high performance. I think founders should be treated in the same way as high performance, where basically high performance athletes, and I think that's really important to acknowledge and also to treat ourselves like that. You go from, you know, a founder of, you know, shipping apartments from your flat, and now all of a sudden you have £15 million and a massive team, but then you don't have the support network around you, the good eating habits, the good sleeping, the things like that athletes do, and this relentless journey it's an ultra marathon. So there's a lot of correlations you can take from sport to a founder, and I think sport is just about the insane self-discipline. You know, from a very young age, I had to be conscious about, you know, what I was eating, and you know, is this healthy? Is this good for me? You know, sleep was always really important. And also,
got the ring.
The Oura ring. Yeah. But also just having that drive on the pitch when it's not going your way on that day, to have that motivation internally to, like, you know, give that to everyone else across the team. If you're a captain and you're losing 1-0 and your head's down, you know, what does that say for the motivation of the team? And I take that, you know, if, you know, my journey right now, if there's something not going our way, I have to be that leader that, you know, can give that positivity across the team. Because if I start putting my head down, how do I expect everyone else's heads to lift up? So there's a lot of similarities between that journey and, I guess, this journey. And I think the other thing that gives me drive is just because, let's be honest, I don't really see many brown female founders.
Sure.
And I kind of want to change that a little bit. And I want to, you know, that kind of gives me a bit of a kick and a bit of a drive, like, yeah, we can do it as well, right? And I do more things like this because I realized, I never did, but then I realized there could be someone listening to this it's inspiring to them, because they actually, you know, when I talk about relatability before, they actually, you know, I might look like them or might come from similar backgrounds from them. So it's much more relatable rather than, you know, listen to a podcast of someone else. So yeah, I think those two things give me strong drive. It's like that captain, football, sport, ultra competitiveness that, like, you know, anything. I'm really bad at table tennis, but if I get on the table tennis in the office, I go into that match thinking I'm going to win. And every time, probably I don't, but every time I go, I still think I'm going to win. Just because of that ultra competitiveness in me. And I think that's given me a huge drive. And then also just being, you know, a female brown founder and trying to hopefully, you know, pave the way for many more.